The Earth swallows cities whole. No warning, no mercy. Just the slow, patient hunger of time itself, devouring everything humanity has ever built. Your greatest monuments, your sprawling metropolises, your towering achievements, all of it becomes nothing more than whispers in the wind. And the terrifying truth? It's happening right now. Look at Pripyat, once a thriving Soviet city of 50,000 souls. Today, trees burst through apartment windows like green fingers reclaiming what was stolen. Vines strangle street lamps. Wolves prowl through kindergarten playgrounds where children's laughter once echoed. In just 40 years, a heartbeat in Earth's timeline, nature has nearly erased an entire civilization. This isn't science fiction. This is the brutal reality of how our planet operates. But here's what will make your blood run cold. What if this erasure isn't new? What if Earth has been perfecting this art of forgetting for billions of years? What if we, all of human civilization, are not the first to call this planet home? Before we dive deeper into this haunting possibility, ensure you subscribe to this channel. What you're about to discover isn't just history. It's a secret written in stone, buried in layers of time that no human eyes have ever read. This is the story they don't want you to know. The story Earth itself has been hiding. The forest doesn't care about your legacy. Stand in the ruins of Angkor Wat, where the Khmer Empire once commanded 1 million subjects. Massive stone faces stare down at you through strangler fig roots that have spent centuries prying apart blocks weighing tons. The trees move slowly. So slowly you'd never notice if you lived a human lifetime. But they move with the patience of geological time, splitting temples like paper, reducing dynasties to rubble. 500 years. That's all it took for the jungle to nearly erase the largest pre-industrial settlement on Earth. 500 years. Your iPhone will be unrecognizable rust in 50. Your concrete foundations will crumble in 200. Your steel skyscrapers, those monuments to human dominance, will be orange stains in the soil before 1,000 years pass. The pyramids of Giza, our most enduring structures, are already smoothed and worn after a mere 4,500 years of desert wind. But Earth has been perfecting erasure for 4.5 billion years. Think about that number. Not 4,500 years, not 45,000 years, 4.5 billion years. If human civilization were a single second, Earth's lifetime would stretch longer than the entire age of the universe as we know it. We've been keeping written records for 5,000 years, a microscopic blip in a story so vast it makes your mind reel. What happened in all that time before us? The answer should terrify you. Water rises without permission. The Mediterranean Sea remembers when it was a desert. 15 million years ago, you could have walked from Spain to Morocco across a salt-crusted wasteland deeper than the Grand Canyon. Then, the Atlantic broke through the Gibraltar Dam. Water thundered in with the force of 1,000 Niagara Falls, filling an entire sea in perhaps a few decades. Everything that lived in that basin, every creature, every plant, every trace of life, vanished beneath waves 2 miles deep. Gone, erased, as if it never existed. But that's nothing compared to what rising seas can do to evidence of intelligence, of technology, of civilization. 70% of Earth's surface lies beneath the oceans.
70% of our planet remains as unexplored as the surface of Mars. What sleeps down there in the crushing darkness? The North Sea hides an entire drowned world. For 700,000 years, Doggerland stretched between Britain and continental Europe, a landscape larger than present-day Britain, home to rivers, forests, and the humans who lived among them. Fishing nets still pull up stone tools and mammoth bones from what was once dry land where our ancestors built their lives. One ice age ends, sea levels rise 400 feet. A continent disappears beneath the waves. How many times has this happened? How many lost worlds lie buried beneath our oceans, their stories dissolved in salt water and time? The ground itself betrays memory. Continental plates drift like massive rafts on molten rock, carrying continents across the globe at the speed fingernails grow. India crashed into Asia and thrust the Himalayas skyward, burying whatever lay in between beneath miles of crushed rock. The Atlantic Ocean spreads wider each year, splitting ancient lands and carrying their secrets to opposite sides of the planet. Subduction zones, those hungry mouths where oceanic plates dive beneath continents, devour entire swaths of seafloor, grinding them back into molten rock. The evidence doesn't just disappear, it gets recycled into the planet's fiery heart, emerging millions of years later as new volcanic rock with no memory of what came before. This is Earth's ultimate erasure. Complete recycling of the evidence itself. Half of our planet's seafloor is younger than 180 million years old, younger than the dinosaurs. Everything older than that has been consumed, digested, and reformed. Entire oceans of history have been fed into the furnace of geological time. What was written on those vanished seafloors? What intelligence might have left its mark on continents that no longer exist? Even fossilization mocks permanence. You think bones last forever? The fossil record preserves perhaps one species in 10,000. Most life leaves no trace whatsoever. No bones, no shells, no imprint in stone. The vast majority of Earth's creatures lived, died, and vanished without a whisper. And that's just individual organisms. What about the products of intelligence? What about technology, art, cities, the accumulated knowledge of entire civilizations? Organic materials, wood, cloth, paper, flesh decay within decades or centuries. Metals corrode, glass eventually crystallizes and crumbles. Even stone weathers away grain by grain. Archaeologists celebrate when they find pottery shards from 10,000 years ago. They treat 50,000-year-old stone tools like priceless treasures. These fragments, these microscopic survivors of human activity, represent the rare exceptions to Earth's relentless appetite for forgetting. But 50,000 years is nothing. It's yesterday. It's a blink of an eye in geological time. What about the civilizations that might have risen and fallen in the hundreds of millions of years before humans walked upright? What about the intelligence that could have flourished when Earth was young, when continents had different shapes, when entirely different oceans covered the planet? The deep past whispers, but we refuse to listen. Ancient cultures around the world tell similar stories, stories that make archaeologists uncomfortable. The Sumerians wrote of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the Great Flood. Hindu texts described vast cycles of time, cosmic ages lasting millions of years, where advanced civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dream time, a period when the world was shaped by beings of immense power and knowledge. Native American traditions describe underground people who taught surface dwellers the arts of civilization before vanishing back into the earth. We call these myths. We dismiss them as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. But what if they're not myths at all? What if they're memories, distorted by countless retellings, but memories nonetheless? Memories of encounters with intelligence far older than our species. Civilizations that mastered Earth when our ancestors were still learning to chip stones into crude tools. Time makes fools of us all. Heinrich Schliemann was mocked when he claimed Troy was real. Archaeologists scoffed when he started digging in Turkey, following directions from Homer's ancient poems. They called him a dreamer, a fraud, a man chasing fairy tales. He found Troy. Not just one Troy, 9 cities built on the same site, each rising from the ashes of the last, each eventually swallowed by war, time, and forgetting. The ruins lay buried for 3,000 years waiting. If Schliemann hadn't followed his obsession, Troy might still be sleeping beneath Turkish soil, dismissed as fiction. How many other myths wait in the ground? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than agriculture itself, lay hidden beneath an artificial hill for 11,000 years. When archaeologists finally uncovered it, they found evidence of architectural sophistication that wasn't supposed to exist for thousands more years. The site rewrote our understanding of human development overnight. If a single discovery can shatter our assumptions about what ancient humans could achieve, what else are we wrong about? What other impossible ruins sleep beneath our feet, waiting for someone brave enough to dig? The question that haunts the night. We've been civilized for perhaps 10,000 years. We've had writing for 5,000. We've understood science for 400. We've split atoms and reached the moon in the last century. Earth has been habitable for nearly 4 billion years. The mathematics are terrifying in their implications. If intelligence could emerge once, if consciousness could arise from the chaos of evolution and build cities, harness energy, reshape landscapes, why couldn't it have happened before? Many times before. The universe doesn't care about human specialness. The laws of physics and chemistry that allow neurons to fire and brains to think have remained constant for billions of years. The same elements that built our bodies and our technologies were present throughout Earth's history. Carbon, silicon, iron, oxygen. The periodic table doesn't change based on which species discovers it. So why should we be the first to walk this path? The silence grows more ominous with each passing year. Every archaeological dig reveals how quickly civilizations disappear. Every geological survey shows how efficiently Earth recycles its surface. Every deep ocean expedition discovers landscapes as alien as other planets, hiding in depths we've barely begun to explore. We pride ourselves on knowing Earth's history, but we've excavated less than 1% of 1% of 1% of the archaeological sites that might exist. We've explored perhaps 5% of the ocean floor with any detail. We've drilled core samples from a microscopic fraction of the continents. Our knowledge is a candle flame in a library the size of continents, and that library has been flooded, burned, buried, and rebuilt countless times over billions of years. What stories were lost in each catastrophe? What records were ground to dust by glaciers, dissolved by acid rain, consumed by volcanic fire? How many libraries of knowledge vanished into subduction zones, carrying their secrets into the molten heart of the planet? The silence in the rocks might not be evidence that we're alone. It might be evidence that Earth is very, very good at keeping secrets. Our cities crumble while we sleep. Detroit's abandoned factories rust in the rain. Chernobyl's apartment blocks crack under the weight of growing trees. The Roman Forum, once the beating heart of an empire spanning 3 continents, now draws tourists who snap selfies with the broken columns of forgotten dreams. These aren't ancient ruins. These are modern catastrophes happening in real time, showing us exactly how fast our achievements can turn to dust. If our greatest cities can begin returning to wilderness within decades of abandonment, what hope do they have across millions of years? What trace will remain of New York, London, Tokyo after the next ice age scrapes continents clean? What evidence will survive the next supervolcanic eruption, the next mass extinction, the next reorganization of the continents themselves? We're witnessing our own future erasure every time a building falls into disrepair. Every crack in concrete, every rust stain on steel, every vine growing through a broken window is Earth demonstrating its patience. Our civilization isn't permanent. It's temporary graffiti on the wall of deep time. And if we can be erased so easily, so completely, then what makes us think we're the first to face this fate? The dead Earth scenario crumbles under scrutiny. For generations, scientists assumed Earth was a sterile rock for most of its existence. They painted pictures of a hostile planet where life struggled to gain a foothold, where intelligence was a recent miracle in a universe of empty stone.
But in geological terms, a million years is nothing. It's background noise in a story spanning billions. Rock formations preserve events lasting millions of years as thin lines in stone. Climate shifts that reshape entire continents appear as gentle curves in data charts. The rise and fall of mountain ranges, processes that dwarf human timescales completely, represent normal, everyday geological activity. In such a context, what would human civilization look like? What would any civilization look like after being compressed by such vast spans of time? Even our most dramatic achievements, nuclear weapons, space exploration, the transformation of Earth's atmosphere, might appear as subtle chemical signals in rock layers, no more significant than the traces left by ancient volcanic eruptions or meteor impacts. The burden of proof shifts to the skeptics. We demand evidence that other civilizations existed on ancient Earth. We insist that absence of proof equals proof of absence. We assume that if we haven't found something, it never existed. But this logic crumbles under examination. We haven't found evidence for most species that ever lived. We haven't explored most of Earth's surface. We haven't examined most of the geological record. Our archaeological methods are designed to find human artifacts from the last few thousand years, not signs of intelligence from millions or billions of years ago. What would we even look for? What signals would survive such vast spans of time? What evidence could persist through multiple ice ages, continental drift, mountain building, and the constant recycling of Earth's surface? Maybe the question isn't why we haven't found evidence of ancient civilizations. Maybe the question is why we expect to find such evidence at all, given how thoroughly time erases the past. Maybe the silence in the rocks doesn't prove we're alone. Maybe it proves that Earth is an expert at forgetting. The night sky holds no comfort. Astronomers search for signs of intelligence in the universe, listening for radio signals from distant stars. They calculate the odds of life emerging, the likelihood of intelligence developing, the probability of civilization surviving long enough to communicate across cosmic distances. They call this the Drake equation, and it suggests the universe should be teeming with intelligence. So where is everybody? Maybe they're here. Maybe they've always been here. Maybe intelligence emerges, flourishes, and vanishes on Earth with such regularity that our brief moment of self-awareness is nothing special, just the latest experiment in consciousness on a planet that has hosted countless others. Maybe the silence we hear from space isn't because we're alone in the universe. Maybe it's because civilizations rise and fall so quickly that they rarely overlap in time, rarely exist simultaneously long enough to detect each other's signals. Maybe we're searching for neighbors in space when we should be searching for predecessors in time. The final darkness approaches with mathematical certainty. Our sun grows brighter every year, slowly heating Earth's surface. In 1 billion years, the oceans will boil away. In 5 billion years, the sun will expand into a red giant and incinerate the inner planets. Long before then, our species will either evolve into something unrecognizable, spread to other worlds, or join the fossil record alongside the trilobites and dinosaurs. But Earth will continue its patient work of erasure, grinding our achievements to dust, recycling our atoms into new forms, forgetting we ever existed. Unless we leave traces that can survive deep time, unless we bury signals deep enough, preserve them carefully enough, scatter them widely enough that some fragment might survive to tell future intelligence that we were here. The same traces we should be looking for from civilizations that came before us. The question that changes everything hangs in the silence between heartbeats. What if our entire understanding of Earth's history is wrong? What if the story we tell ourselves about being the first intelligent species to arise on this planet is nothing more than the comfortable delusion
of a species too young to recognize the depth of time.
What if civilizations have been rising and falling on Earth for hundreds of millions of years, each one believing they were the first, each one eventually joining the geological record as a thin layer of unusual chemistry in ancient stone? What if we're not pioneers, but merely the latest chapter in a story that has been told countless times before, a story written in languages we don't recognize, preserved in places we haven't learned to look? The rocks remember everything and tell us nothing. The fossil record speaks in whispers we're only beginning to understand. The deep ocean keeps secrets darker than its lightless depths. And somewhere in that darkness, in those whispers, in that ancient stone, the truth waits. If even our greatest cities could vanish within a few thousand years, what survives for millions? The answer will either comfort you or haunt your dreams forever. But first, you need to understand exactly how Earth buries its secrets and why the ground beneath your feet might be hiding the greatest discovery in human history. Fall through the Earth, down through concrete and asphalt, down through topsoil and clay, down through limestone that was once a tropical seafloor, down through sandstone that remembers ancient deserts, down through granite older than complex life itself. Each layer is a page in Earth's diary. Most pages are missing. You're falling through 4.5 billion years of history, and the deeper you go, the more the story dissolves. Entire chapters of Earth's past have been ripped out, burned, ground to powder, and fed back into the planetary furnace. What remains are scattered fragments, incomplete sentences in a language we're still learning to read. But here's what will chill your blood. If Earth can erase mountains, drain seas, and shuffle continents like playing cards, what hope did ancient civilizations ever have of leaving lasting evidence? The answer lies buried in the mechanics of planetary amnesia, and it's more terrifying than you think. Rock moves like water when you give it time. The Himalayas thrust skyward at the speed of growing fingernails, 2 inches per year. Sound slow? In 10 million years, that's 300 miles of vertical movement. Mountains rise from sea level to pierce the clouds, then erode back to nothing, all while continents drift across the globe like massive ships on an ocean of molten rock. The Appalachian Mountains were once as tall as the Himalayas are today. Time ground them down to gentle hills. The Scottish Highlands were once connected to the mountains of Norway, before the Atlantic Ocean split them apart and carried them to opposite sides of a widening sea. This is deep time in action. This is the force that makes mockery of permanence. Your concrete foundations, they'll crumble to sand grains in mere millennia. Steel skyscrapers will rust to orange stains in centuries. But even if you built monuments from the hardest granite, even if you carved your message into diamond itself, the moving earth would eventually grind it all to powder and scatter it to the winds. Geology doesn't just preserve the past, it devours it. Fossilization is a lottery where almost everyone loses. Think you understand how fossils form? A creature dies, gets buried, turns to stone? The reality is far more brutal. For every fossil we find, millions of organisms lived and died without leaving a trace. The conditions for preservation are so precise, so unlikely, that most of Earth's biological history vanished without record. A creature must die in exactly the right place, be buried in exactly the right sediment, under exactly the right chemical conditions, and then survive millions of years of geological violence. The odds are astronomical against preservation. Now apply that to intelligence, to technology, to the products of civilization. Organic materials, wood, leather, cloth, paper, decay within decades. Metals corrode. Glass eventually deforms and shatters. Even ceramics, among the most durable human artifacts, crack and crumble given enough time. What we call permanent materials are temporary on geological timescales. What we consider durable wouldn't survive a single ice age, let alone the deep time spans where ancient civilizations might have flourished. The absence of artifacts doesn't prove absence of intelligence.
It might just prove that Earth is brutally efficient at erasing evidence. Subduction zones are Earth's paper shredders. Where oceanic plates dive beneath continental margins, entire chunks of seafloor get dragged into the planet's molten interior. Everything on those plates, sediments, fossils, potentially the remnants of civilizations, gets recycled into magma and emerges millions of years later as fresh volcanic rock with no memory of what came before. Half of Earth's ocean floor is younger than 180 million years. Everything older has been consumed. Think about that. Entire oceans of evidence have been fed into geological furnaces and reformed into new rock. If intelligence arose on Earth 300 million years ago, 500 million years ago, a billion years ago, most of the seafloor where evidence might have accumulated no longer exists. It's been eaten by the planet itself. The ocean floors that might have held the ruins of ancient ports, the chemical signatures of industrial activity, the metal deposits of technological civilizations, gone, consumed, digested by Earth's molten heart and regurgitated as blank volcanic stone. How can we search for evidence that has been literally recycled by planetary processes beyond our ability to prevent or predict? Ice ages scrape continents clean. Every 100,000 years or so, massive ice sheets advance from the poles and grind across the continents like planetary bulldozers. They carve valleys thousands of feet deep, transport boulders the size of buildings across hundreds of miles, and strip away everything in their path down to bare bedrock. The Laurentide ice sheet covered most of North America during the last glacial maximum. It was 2 miles thick in places, a wall of ice that would dwarf the tallest skyscrapers, grinding inexorably across a continent for thousands of years. When the ice finally retreated 12,000 years ago, it left behind a landscape scoured clean of most evidence of previous habitation. Ancient river channels were obliterated, hills were ground flat. Any surface traces of pre-Ice Age civilizations were either pulverized beneath the glaciers or buried under hundreds of feet of glacial debris. And this wasn't a one-time event. Earth has experienced dozens of ice ages over the past few million years. Each one reset large portions of the continents, erasing surface history and burying older landscapes under new deposits. How many times could civilizations have risen and fallen between ice ages? How many times could intelligence have flourished during warm periods only to be ground to powder when the glaciers returned? Troy teaches us about the blindness of assumption. For centuries, scholars dismissed Homer's Iliad as pure fiction. The siege of Troy, the war between Greeks and Trojans, the wooden horse, all fairy tales, they said. Ancient poems weren't historical documents. They were entertainment, mythology, the invented adventures of imaginary heroes. Heinrich Schliemann refused to accept this comfortable dismissal. Following directions embedded in ancient poetry, he dug into a hill in northwest Turkey. His workers uncovered not one Troy, but 9 cities built on the same site. Each Troy had risen from the ashes of the last. Each had thrived, declined, and been buried by time and human conflict. The mythical city had been waiting beneath the soil for 3,000 years. If Troy could hide in plain sight for millennia, dismissed by experts as impossible fantasy until someone bothered to dig, what other impossible histories are we ignoring? What other ancient accounts do we wave away as mythology without investigating the landscapes they describe? The Sumerians wrote of a great flood that destroyed the world. Similar flood stories appear in cultures across the globe. Mesopotamian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Native American traditions all speak of waters that rose to cover the earth, drowning entire civilizations. We call these myths, but what if they're memories? distorted by countless retellings, but memories nonetheless of real catastrophes that erased real civilizations from real landscapes. Göbekli Tepe rewrote history overnight.
Until 1994, archaeologists knew that complex architecture required agriculture. Settled farming came first, they insisted, then permanent settlements, then monumental construction. Hunter-gatherers couldn't organize the massive labor projects needed to build temples and ceremonial complexes. Then Klaus Schmidt uncovered Göbekli Tepe. The site in southeastern Turkey features massive stone pillars arranged in complex circles decorated with intricate carvings of animals and abstract symbols. Some pillars weigh 16 tons, moved and positioned by people using only rope, wooden levers, and human muscle. The dating results shattered archaeological assumptions. Göbekli Tepe is 11,500 years old, built before agriculture, before pottery, before metal tools. Hunter-gatherers constructed the world's first monumental architecture, then deliberately buried it under tons of soil around 8000 BCE. One discovery forced archaeologists to rewrite thousands of years of human history. If a single site could overturn decades of scholarly consensus about what ancient people could achieve, what else are we wrong about? What other impossible ruins wait beneath our feet, hidden by assumptions about what past civilizations could or couldn't do? The geological record reads like a book with most pages torn out. Sedimentary layers preserve only the briefest snapshots of Earth's history. Even where rock formations survive intact, they represent tiny fractions of geological time. A limestone layer representing 10 million years of deposition might be followed by a gap, an unconformity where 50 million years of history is simply missing. Erosion stripped away those intervening layers. Uplift and weathering destroyed the evidence. Geological processes created blank spaces in the record where entire eras of Earth's story vanished without trace. These gaps aren't rare exceptions. They're the norm. Most of Earth's surface has been recycled multiple times through weathering, deposition, burial, uplift, and erosion again. The rock beneath your feet has been ground up and reformed countless times over hundreds of millions of years. What was written in those missing layers? What stories were erased during those gaps in the record? If intelligence arose during periods now lost to erosion and recycling, how would we ever detect its traces? We're trying to read Earth's biography from random pages scattered through a library that's been flooded, burned, and rebuilt repeatedly over billions of years. Time transforms the impossible into the inevitable. Give evolution enough time and it produces eyes dozens of separate times. Give it more time and it develops flight independently in insects, birds, bats, and pterosaurs. Extend the timeline further and intelligence emerges in octopi, dolphins, elephants, primates, and corvids, species separated by hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary history. Intelligence isn't a fluke. It's a solution that evolution discovers repeatedly. So why should technological intelligence be any different? Why should the ability to manipulate the environment, create tools, and build complex societies be limited to one species on one planet during one brief moment in geological time? The universe doesn't seem to have a bias against problem-solving minds. The laws of physics that allow neurons to fire and brains to compute have remained constant for billions of years. The same chemistry that builds our technologies, carbon, silicon, metals, energy gradients, has been available throughout Earth's history. If intelligence is inevitable given enough time and opportunities, then technological civilizations might be inevitable too. Not unique to humans, not limited to the last few thousand years, but recurring throughout Earth's deep history like flowers blooming in spring, rising and falling with the geological seasons of our ever-changing planet. The Hindu cosmos laughs at our provincial timescales. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe cosmic cycles spanning billions of years, vast ages where civilizations rise to unimaginable heights, then decline and are forgotten before the cycle begins again. The Puranas speak of previous creations, other worlds, other humanities that mastered technologies beyond current understanding before being swept away by cosmic time.
We dismiss these as religious mythology. But what if they're historical memory, compressed and mythologized by countless generations of storytelling? Hindu cosmology measures time in kalpa, days of Brahma lasting 4.32 billion years each. Our current universe is supposedly middle-aged, having passed through countless cycles of creation and destruction already. Advanced civilizations have risen and fallen like waves on an ocean, each believing themselves the first to achieve intelligence, each eventually joining the geological record. The mathematics are eerily similar to Earth's actual age. The timescales match the deep time required for continents to drift, mountains to rise and erode, species to evolve and go extinct. What if ancient texts preserve actual memories of previous cycles of intelligence on Earth? What if the mythology contains historical truth stretched and distorted by the passage of geological time? Sumerian king lists record impossible lifespans. Before the Great Flood, according to ancient Mesopotamian records, kings ruled for tens of thousands of years. Ululim reigned for 28,800 years. Alujar held power for 36,000 years. 8 kings ruled for a combined total of 241,200 years before the deluge swept their civilization away. After the flood, lifespans became more reasonable, still measured in centuries, but no longer in geological spans. Scholars explain these numbers as symbolic, mythological, impossible exaggerations by ancient scribes who didn't understand realistic timescales. But what if the scribes were recording something real? What if they were preserving memories of contact with beings whose lifespans, technologies, or civilizational continuity actually did span geological periods? What if the gods and divine kings of ancient mythology were representatives of species or civilizations that achieved such technological mastery that they could survive for millions of years, long enough to seem eternal to shorter-lived species like early humans? The flood stories that end these impossible reigns might preserve memories of genuine catastrophes that destroyed advanced civilizations, leaving only scattered survivors to share distorted tales with the primitive humans who inherited the post-catastrophe world. Continental drift carries secrets to unreachable depths. 200 million years ago, all of Earth's continents were locked together in the supercontinent Pangaea. Since then, tectonic forces have pulled the land masses apart, carrying different pieces of Earth's surface to opposite sides of the planet. What if intelligence arose during the Pangaean period? What if technological civilizations flourished when the geography was completely different, when different rivers flowed across different landscapes under different climates? As the continents drifted apart, they carried any evidence with them. Artifacts that once lay in the same region might now be separated by entire oceans. Archaeological sites that could provide crucial context for understanding ancient civilizations might be scattered across multiple continents, their relationships invisible to researchers who study only local regions. Worse, much of the evidence might have been carried into subduction zones as the continents moved. The ocean floors that once separated ancient landmasses have been consumed by geological processes, taking their potential archaeological treasures with them into the Earth's molten interior. We're trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces have been scattered across the globe and many have been thrown into a fire.
Volcanic catastrophes reset regional histories. The Toba supervolcanic eruption 74,000 years ago ejected 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and rock into the atmosphere. The explosion was heard across continents. Ash layers from the eruption are found in ice cores from Greenland and sediment cores from the Indian Ocean. The environmental impact was devastating. Global temperatures dropped by several degrees for years. Monsoon patterns shifted. Ecosystems collapsed across vast regions. The human population may have been reduced to as few as 10,000 individuals worldwide. Any civilizations that existed in Southeast Asia at the time would have been obliterated. Not just killed, erased so completely that we'd never find evidence they existed. The Toba ash layer would have buried their ruins under meters of sterile volcanic debris. And Toba wasn't unique. Yellowstone has erupted catastrophically at least 3 times in the past 2 million years. Each eruption was powerful enough to bury half of North America under ash and alter global climate for decades. How many times have supervolcanic eruptions reset Earth's civilizational history? How many advanced cultures were destroyed so completely by volcanic catastrophes that they left no recoverable trace? The ocean floors hold secrets we'll never reach. Most of Earth's surface lies beneath water depths that crush submarines and dissolve organic materials within decades. The abyssal plains stretch for thousands of miles in lightless cold, covered by sediments accumulated over millions of years. If ancient civilizations built cities near coastlines, as most human cities have, then sea level changes would have drowned their ruins beneath hundreds of feet of water and sediment. Rising seas at the end of ice ages flooded vast coastal shelves, carrying away any surface evidence and burying what remained under marine deposits. The Mediterranean was a dry basin 5.96 million years ago. Any civilizations that developed in that vast landscape would now lie beneath 2 miles of seawater and millions of years of accumulated sediments. The North Sea was dry land for hundreds of thousands of years during ice ages. The Persian Gulf was a river valley. The English Channel was a fertile plain. All of these landscapes, potentially home to advanced civilizations during favorable climate periods, are now inaccessible beneath crushing ocean depths. We can't excavate underwater sites at these depths. We can't search for artifacts buried beneath miles of marine sediments. The evidence we seek might exist, but it might be literally unreachable given our current technology and the vast scope of Earth's hidden underwater landscapes. Carbon dating fails in deep time. Our most reliable method for dating organic artifacts becomes useless beyond about 50,000 years. Carbon-14 decays too rapidly to provide accurate dates for older materials. For anything predating the last ice age, we must rely on other methods that are less precise and work only under specific conditions. This creates a detection barrier. If civilizations arose and fell more than 50,000 years ago, our primary archaeological dating tool can't help us identify their artifacts. We'd need to develop entirely new methods for recognizing and dating evidence from deep time periods. But even if we could date ancient artifacts accurately, we'd still need to find them first. And finding them requires knowing where to look, what to look for, and how to recognize signs of intelligence that might be utterly unlike anything in our experience. We are handicapped by both technical limitations and conceptual assumptions about what ancient intelligence might have looked like. Ice cores call out the atmospheric revolutions we can't explain. Deep in Antarctic ice, frozen bubbles preserve samples of ancient atmospheres going back 800,000 years. The chemical signatures tell stories of volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and climate shifts, but they also reveal mysterious events that don't match any known natural phenomena. Sudden spikes in methane, inexplicable changes in carbon isotope ratios, chemical signatures that suggest massive industrial activity during periods when, according to our understanding of history, no industry should have existed. We attribute these anomalies to natural causes because we can't imagine alternatives.
Massive volcanic outgassing.
meteor impacts, shifts in ocean circulation. But what if some of these mysterious atmospheric events were actually the signatures of ancient civilizations burning through their resources, transforming their environment, and then collapsing when their industrial activity triggered climate changes they couldn't control? What if the ice cores preserve evidence of multiple previous industrial revolutions, each one brief in geological terms, but intense enough to leave chemical fingerprints in the atmosphere? The whispers are there in the frozen record. We just haven't learned how to listen. If so much of human history nearly vanished in a few thousand years, what stories did the Earth already shred? Troy lay buried for 3 millennia until one obsessed amateur archaeologist refused to accept scholarly consensus. Göbekli Tepe waited 11,000 years beneath a Turkish hillside, rewriting archaeological theory when it was finally uncovered. Entire Ice Age landscapes remain hidden beneath modern seas, their stories locked away beneath crushing depths and millions of years of sediment. We've explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. We've excavated a microscopic fraction of potential archaeological sites. We've barely begun to understand the deep time processes that bury, preserve, and destroy evidence of past civilizations. The silence in the rocks might not prove we're alone in Earth's history. It might prove that our planet is extraordinarily efficient at erasing the past, grinding civilizations into geological anonymity, and forcing each new intelligence to rediscover the uncomfortable truth that time makes strangers of us all, and the Earth remembers nothing of our pride. Watch the termite mound. Rising from the African savanna, like a twisted cathedral, the structure towers 20 feet above the grassland. Inside, millions of individuals coordinate their activities through chemical signals and physical contact, creating a civilization more complex than many human cities. They maintain constant temperature through architectural ventilation. They farm fungus gardens in underground chambers. They wage wars, capture slaves, and establish trade routes spanning miles of territory. Their structures last for decades, sometimes centuries, housing populations larger than ancient Athens. But here's what should make you question everything you think you know about intelligence. If termites went extinct tomorrow, almost no trace of their sophisticated civilization would survive in the fossil record. Their buildings are made of mud and saliva, materials that erode within years when not actively maintained. Their complex social behaviors leave no permanent artifacts. Their chemical communication systems disappear the moment they stop functioning. Within decades of abandonment, termite cities return to soil, indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. If we can barely detect the civilization of creatures we can observe today, how could we ever recognize the traces of intelligence that might have flourished millions of years ago? The answer is hiding in the shadows of mythology and the blind spots of science, and it will shake you to your core. The Silurian hypothesis asks the forbidden question. In 2018, astrophysicist Gavin Schmidt and astrobiologist Adam Frank published a paper with an innocuous title that disguised a revolutionary concept. They called it the Silurian hypothesis, named after the fictional reptilian species from Doctor Who that supposedly ruled Earth before humans evolved. Their question was simple and terrifying. Would we be able to detect an industrial civilization in Earth's geological record if it existed millions of years ago? The answer shocked even the scientists who asked it. Probably not. An industrial civilization lasting even millions of years, far longer than humans have existed, would appear as nothing more than a brief chemical anomaly in rock layers. The physical artifacts would be long gone. The cities would be eroded to dust. The only traces might be subtle shifts in isotope ratios, slight changes in sediment chemistry, minor perturbations in the carbon cycle. And here's the truly unsettling part. we've already found unexplained chemical anomalies in ancient rock formations. Sudden carbon isotope excursions, mysterious metal concentrations, atmospheric signatures that don't match known natural processes. We call them geological mysteries. We attribute them to volcanism, meteor impacts, or unknown biological processes. But what if there's something else entirely? Ancient myths whisper of impossible histories. Every human culture on Earth tells similar stories, stories that make archaeologists uncomfortable. Tales of advanced beings who ruled before humanity's rise, accounts of golden ages when technology surpassed our current understanding, legends of catastrophes that reset civilization and forced survivors to rebuild from primitive conditions. The Greeks spoke of Atlantis, not just a lost city, but an advanced civilization that mastered engineering, navigation, and warfare before sinking beneath the waves in a single day and night. Plato claimed he received this account through Egyptian priests who maintained records stretching back thousands of years. Hindu texts describe vimanas, flying vehicles used by the gods in ancient wars. The descriptions include technical details: mercury engines, layered construction materials, electromagnetic propulsion systems. The level of technical specificity suggests more than mythological imagination. We dismiss these as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. But what if they're distorted memories of actual contact with technological civilizations that preceded human development? Ancient myths whisper of impossible histories. The Hopi people of North America speak of previous worlds, 3 civilizations that rose to great heights before being destroyed by their own technological excesses. According to their traditions, we currently live in the 4th world, and the signs suggest this world, too, is approaching its end. The first world was destroyed by fire from above and below. The second world was destroyed by ice. The third world was destroyed by flood. Each destruction came after the inhabitants abandoned spiritual balance in favor of technological power. But here's what makes archaeologists squirm. The Hopi describe survivors from each previous world. They speak of the ant people, underground dwellers who sheltered human survivors during the catastrophes and taught them essential knowledge for rebuilding civilization. Similar stories appear in cultures worldwide. Australian Aboriginals speak of the dream time when powerful beings shaped the landscape and established the laws that govern reality. Their songlines map not just geographic features, but also temporal relationships, paths through both space and time that preserve knowledge spanning tens of thousands of years. Native American tribes across North America share traditions of underground people who emerged to teach surface dwellers agriculture, astronomy, and spiritual practices before returning to hidden cities beneath the earth. These aren't isolated myths. They're consistent themes appearing in cultures that had no contact with each other for thousands of years. Either humanity independently invented the same fictional narratives across all continents, or these stories preserve actual memories of encounters with older, more advanced civilizations. The Indus Valley speaks in tongues we cannot understand. From 2600 to 1900 BCE, the Harappan civilization flourished across what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Their cities featured sophisticated urban planning, grid-patterned streets, advanced sewage systems, standardized weights and measures, and impressive hydraulic engineering. But here's the mystery that keeps archaeologists awake at night. We cannot read their writing. The Indus Valley script appears on thousands of artifacts, seals, pottery, tablets, even massive stone monuments. The symbols clearly represent a complex writing system, But despite decades of scholarly effort, the script remains completely undeciphered.
We don't even know what language the symbols represent. We can't read the names of their kings, understand their religious beliefs, or comprehend their scientific knowledge. An entire civilization that lasted longer than the Roman Empire remains mute, its voices locked away in symbols we cannot translate. Now, consider this. If we cannot understand the writing of a civilization that existed just 4,000 years ago, how could we ever recognize or interpret evidence from civilizations that might have flourished millions of years ago? The failure to decode the Indus Valley script reveals the limitations of our archaeological methods. We're trying to understand the past through fragments of evidence, using assumptions based on our own cultural experiences. When we encounter something genuinely alien, even from our own species' recent history, we're often helpless to interpret it. Olmec heads stare across impossible oceans. In the jungles of Mexico, colossal stone heads watch over ruins that predate the Maya by more than 1,000 years. The Olmec civilization flourished from 1200 to 400 BCE, creating sophisticated art, developing complex mathematical systems, and establishing trade networks spanning continents. But the heads themselves present a puzzle that mainstream archaeology struggles to explain. The facial features are unmistakably African, not Native American. The sculptures show people with broad noses, thick lips, and other characteristics typical of sub-Saharan populations. How did people with African features come to be immortalized in stone by a pre-Columbian American civilization? The official explanation involves migration patterns during the Ice Age, genetic drift, and artistic interpretation. But alternative theories suggest something more provocative, that advanced civilizations maintained contact across oceans thousands of years before Columbus, using navigation technologies that conventional history claims didn't exist. Similar anomalies appear worldwide. Celtic-style stone circles in New England that predate European colonization, Roman coins found in American archaeological sites, Asian artifacts discovered in pre-Columbian contexts. Each discovery is explained away individually, but together they suggest a pattern that advanced civilizations might have been navigating global trade routes, sharing technologies, and maintaining cultural contact long before our historical timelines suggest such capabilities existed. Göbekli Tepe forces us to question everything we thought we knew. The massive stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey weren't just built before agriculture. They were deliberately buried around 8,000 BCE. Someone spent enormous effort to hide the site beneath tons of soil, preserving it for future discovery. Why would a civilization deliberately conceal its greatest architectural achievement? The site's astronomical alignments suggest its builders possessed sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The intricate carvings depict animals that had been extinct in the region for thousands of years, as if the artists were working from ancient knowledge or direct memory of earlier ecosystems. Carbon dating of organic material in the mortar places construction at 11,500 years ago, but the site might be much older. The pillars themselves could have been carved during an even earlier period, then assembled and arranged by the people we credit with the site's creation. If Göbekli Tepe represents a repository of much older knowledge, a reconstruction of ancient wisdom rather than an original creation, then it changes everything about our understanding of human development. Instead of representing the beginning of monumental architecture, it might represent the end of a much longer tradition of advanced construction techniques. The deliberate burial of the site takes on new significance in this context. Perhaps it wasn't hidden to preserve it for the future, Perhaps it was hidden to conceal evidence of capabilities that predated the official timeline of human civilization. Cahokia's disappearance demonstrates how quickly civilizations vanish. At its peak around 1100 CE, Cahokia was larger than London. The city near present-day St. Louis housed between 10,000 and 20,000 people, making it the largest urban center north of Mexico until Philadelphia grew to a similar size in the 1780s.
The civilization featured sophisticated urban planning, complex earthwork constructions, and trade networks stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Their agricultural techniques supported population densities that wouldn't be matched in the region for another 700 years. Then, they vanished. By 1400 CE, Cahokia was completely abandoned. When European explorers reached the Mississippi River Valley, they found only scattered tribal groups with no memory of the great city that had flourished just a few centuries earlier. The massive earthworks were attributed to a mysterious mound builder race, because European settlers couldn't believe Native Americans had been capable of such sophisticated construction. The rapid abandonment and cultural amnesia surrounding Cahokia reveals how quickly even major civilizations can be forgotten. A city that dominated the North American continent for centuries became a mystery within a few generations of its collapse. If a civilization lasting 300 years could vanish from cultural memory so completely, how much easier would it be for civilizations existing millions of years ago to disappear without trace? The Bronze Age collapse erased empires overnight. Around 1200 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean experienced a civilizational catastrophe so complete that historians call it the Late Bronze Age collapse. Within a few decades, almost every major urban center from Greece to Mesopotamia was destroyed or abandoned. The Mycenaean palaces of Greece burned, the Hittite Empire disintegrated. Egyptian cities fell to mysterious invaders called the Sea Peoples. Trade networks that had connected civilizations across thousands of miles collapsed completely. Writing disappeared from entire regions. The linear B script of the Mycenaeans was forgotten so completely that it wasn't deciphered until the 1950s. Populations declined dramatically. Technology was lost. Many areas didn't recover urban civilization for centuries. What caused this widespread collapse remains hotly debated. Climate change, invasions by mysterious seaborne raiders, internal political upheaval, economic disruption, probably some combination of all these factors triggered a cascade of civilizational failure. But here's what should terrify you about the Bronze Age collapse. It demonstrates how quickly advanced civilizations can be completely destroyed, their knowledge lost, their population scattered, their very existence nearly erased from history. If civilizations lasting over 1,000 years could vanish so completely that we're still puzzling out what happened to them, how could we ever detect civilizations that rose and fell millions of years ago? Modern genetic analysis has revealed startling truths about human evolution that contradict previous assumptions. We now know that multiple human species coexisted for hundreds of thousands of years. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and anatomically modern humans interbred regularly, leaving genetic signatures that persist in current populations. But there are genetic ghosts in human DNA, traces of admixture with unknown populations that don't match any discovered fossil remains. Some genetic lineages suggest contact with archaic human species that left no skeletal evidence, no artifacts, no traces beyond the chemical echoes in our chromosomes. Who were these ghost populations? When did the genetic mixing occur? And why do they appear in our DNA but not in the archaeological record? The most unsettling possibility is that some of these genetic signatures might represent contact with populations that were more advanced than their contemporaries, groups that developed technologies allowing them to survive environmental catastrophes that destroyed less adaptable populations. If technologically superior human populations existed in the deep past but left no material culture in the fossil record, it suggests that advanced capabilities might be much older than we assume. Intelligence,
Innovation and sophisticated adaptation strategies might have emerged repeatedly throughout human evolution, only to be lost when environmental changes destroyed the populations that carried them. The Antikythera mechanism proves our assumptions wrong. Discovered in a Roman shipwreck off the Greek coast, the Antikythera mechanism is perhaps the most sophisticated piece of ancient technology ever found. Built around 100 BCE, this bronze device contains dozens of precisely cut gears that accurately predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets decades into the future. The mechanism represents a level of technological sophistication that wasn't supposed to exist until the development of mechanical clocks in medieval Europe, more than 1,000 years later. But here's what should shake your confidence in archaeological assumptions. If this single device hadn't survived in a shipwreck, we would never have known such technology existed in the ancient world. We would have continued believing that complex gear trains were a much later invention. How many other sophisticated technologies existed in the ancient world but left no surviving examples? How many innovations were developed, used for centuries or millennia, then lost during periods of civilizational collapse? The Antikythera mechanism proves our assumptions about ancient technological capabilities are wrong. If we're wrong about what civilizations could achieve just 2,000 years ago, how wrong might we be about what intelligence could have accomplished millions of years ago? Quartz crystals remember everything. Silicon dioxide, common quartz, has unusual properties that make it valuable for modern technology. Quartz crystals can store information, regulate electrical frequencies, and maintain precise timing. They're used in computer memory, radio transmitters, and precision instrumentation. But quartz also occurs naturally throughout Earth's crust, and naturally occurring quartz crystals can preserve information for millions of years under the right conditions. What if ancient civilizations discovered the information storage properties of quartz long before we did? What if they encoded knowledge, histories, or technical specifications in crystalline structures that remain buried in rock formations we haven't learned to read? Recent research has demonstrated that quartz crystals can preserve DNA intact for hundreds of thousands of years in crystalline structures. If biological information can survive such vast time spans in crystalline structures, why not other types of encoded data? We might be surrounded by libraries of ancient knowledge preserved in the most common mineral on Earth's surface. We just haven't developed the techniques to access the information or recognize it when we find it. Magnetic reversals hide catastrophic histories. Earth's magnetic field has reversed polarity hundreds of times throughout geological history. During reversal periods, the magnetic field weakens dramatically, allowing increased cosmic radiation to reach the planet's surface. These episodes of magnetic instability coincide with mass extinction events and rapid evolutionary changes, but they might also coincide with the rise and fall of technological civilizations. A species that developed electronics, radio communication, or other technologies dependent on stable electromagnetic conditions would face severe disruption during magnetic reversals. Their infrastructure might fail, their communication systems might collapse, their entire technological civilization could be forced back to pre-industrial conditions within a few generations. The geological record shows that magnetic reversals occur roughly every 200,000 to 300,000 years on average. If technological civilizations arise periodically throughout Earth's history, magnetic reversals might act as a reset mechanism, repeatedly destroying advanced societies and forcing intelligence to start over from primitive conditions.
This could explain the cyclical nature of mythological accounts. Stories of golden ages followed by catastrophic destruction might preserve actual memories of civilizations that rose during periods of magnetic stability, only to collapse when the field reversed and their technology failed.
Underground cities hint at hidden histories. Derinkuyu in Turkey descends 11 levels deep into solid rock. The underground city could house 20,000 people along with their livestock and food stores. Sophisticated ventilation systems provided fresh air to the deepest chambers. Complex tunnel networks connected multiple underground cities across the region. Who built these massive excavations? When? And why? The official explanation focuses on early Christian communities hiding from Roman persecution. But the scale and sophistication of the construction suggests a much longer period of development. Some chambers show evidence of continuous occupation spanning thousands of years. Similar underground complexes exist worldwide. The Cu Chi tunnels in Vietnam, the catacombs beneath Paris and Rome, the rock-cut cities of Petra, the underground networks of Cappadocia. What if these known sites represent the accessible remnants of much more extensive subterranean civilizations? What if intelligence repeatedly turned to underground construction as a strategy for surviving surface catastrophes? Underground structures would be naturally protected from ice ages, volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and the gradual erosion that destroys surface architecture. They might preserve evidence of ancient civilizations long after all surface traces have been destroyed. We've barely begun to explore the underground networks that we know exist. What lies deeper? What vast buried cities might exist beneath our feet, waiting for someone to dig deep enough to find them? The Younger Dryas period erased 1,300 years of progress. 12,900 years ago, Earth suddenly plunged back into Ice Age conditions. Global temperatures dropped by more than 10 degrees in less than a decade. The brief warming that had begun to end the last Ice Age reversed catastrophically, and the planet remained locked in glacial conditions for another 1,300 years. The Younger Dryas period coincides exactly with the disappearance of the Clovis culture in North America and similar disruptions to human populations worldwide. Archaeological evidence suggests that many human settlements were abandoned during this period, and populations declined dramatically across multiple continents. What caused this sudden climate reversal? The leading theory involves the collapse of ice dams that released massive amounts of fresh water into the North Atlantic, disrupting ocean currents that regulate global temperature. But some researchers suggest more catastrophic explanations: meteor impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, or other cosmic events. Regardless of the cause, the Younger Dryas demonstrates how quickly favorable climate conditions can change and how completely such changes can disrupt human civilization. Any advanced societies that had developed during the preceding warm period would have faced extinction-level challenges. The rapid climate change would have made agriculture impossible in many regions. Sea levels would have shifted dramatically. Weather patterns would have become chaotic and unpredictable. If technological civilizations had begun to emerge during the brief warming before the Younger Dryas, they would have been destroyed so completely by the climate catastrophe that we might never find evidence of their existence. Termite cities dissolve without maintenance. Coral reefs crumble when conditions change. Beaver dams collapse when their engineers disappear. Nature shows us repeatedly that even the most sophisticated non-human constructions vanish quickly when not actively maintained. If we can barely detect the civilizations of species we can observe today,
How could we ever recognize traces of intelligence that flourished and faded millions of years ago? The question forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility, that our definition of civilization is too narrow, our methods of detection too crude, our understanding of deep time too limited to recognize the evidence that surrounds us.
What if intelligence has been experimenting with different forms throughout Earth's history? What if consciousness has been trying different approaches to technology, different relationships with the environment, different strategies for long-term survival? What if the myths and legends that speak of earlier ages, lost civilizations, and vanished peoples are not fantasies, but fractured memories of actual experiments in intelligence that preceded our brief moment of technological awareness? The termite mounds will crumble when their builders are gone. The coral cities will dissolve when the ocean chemistry shifts. The beaver dams will collapse when the water levels change. And someday, our concrete jungles and steel monuments will rust and crumble too, returning to the patient Earth that has been witness to countless other experiments in intelligence, countless other civilizations that believed themselves permanent, countless other species that asked the same question we're asking now. What signals could endure when all else dissolves? The answer lies not in the monuments we build, but in the invisible traces we leave in the very chemistry of the planet itself. Fingerprints so subtle, we're only now learning how to detect them. Echoes so faint, we might have been hearing them for decades without recognizing their true significance. The aliens land on Earth 50 million years from now. They unfold from their ship like metallic flowers, sensors sweeping across a planet that barely resembles the world we know today. Continents have drifted to new positions, mountain ranges have risen and eroded, oceans have opened and closed. The surface bears no trace of cities, highways, or monuments. But they're not looking for monuments. They drill into the rock. They analyze sediment cores. They measure isotope ratios with precision that makes our best instruments look like stone axes. And slowly, methodically, they reconstruct the story of a species that lived and died long before their arrival. They find the signature written in stone, a thin layer of altered chemistry that screams of intelligence, industry, and ecological catastrophe. They don't need to find a single building or artifact. The rocks themselves preserve the fingerprint of a civilization that burned through its planet's resources in a geological instant. The question that should terrify you: what if we're not the first species to leave such fingerprints? What if alien archaeologists visiting Earth today would find similar signatures buried deeper in the geological record, echoes of industrial civilizations that rose and fell long before humans walked upright? The evidence is hiding in the chemistry of the planet itself, and it's more disturbing than you can imagine. Carbon isotopes don't lie. When you burn fossil fuels, you're not just releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You're releasing carbon with a specific isotopic signature, carbon-12, that's been locked away underground for millions of years. Carbon that's chemically different from the carbon cycling through living ecosystems. This difference is detectable, measurable, permanent. The carbon from coal and oil has a distinct isotopic fingerprint because it's been isolated from biological processes for geological periods. When industrial civilizations burn these fossil fuels, they flood the atmosphere with carbon that has an unmistakable chemical signature. That signature gets preserved in ice cores, lake sediments, and the shells of marine organisms. It becomes part of the geological record, a permanent marker that screams, "Industrial activity happened here," to anyone who knows how to read the chemical language. We can already detect our own industrial signature in ice cores going back to 1750. The carbon isotope ratios shifted dramatically when the Industrial Revolution began, creating a chemical boundary layer that will remain detectable for millions of years. But here's what keeps geochemists awake at night. Similar isotope excursions appear throughout Earth's geological history. Sudden shifts in carbon chemistry that mirror our own industrial signature. Events that look exactly like what we'd expect from fossil fuel burning, but occurring millions of years before humans evolved. We call them natural events, volcanic outgassing, methane releases from warming oceans, asteroid impacts. But what if some of them aren't natural at all? The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum mirrors our nightmare. 56 million years ago, global temperatures spiked by 15 degrees in less than 10,000 years. The Arctic Ocean reached subtropical temperatures. Crocodiles swam in polar seas. Massive amounts of carbon flooded the atmosphere, triggering one of the most dramatic climate changes in Earth's history. The event lasted 200,000 years before the climate system gradually returned to normal conditions, but the isotopic signature of the carbon release matches exactly what we'd expect from massive fossil fuel combustion. Scientists explain the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum through natural mechanisms: volcanic activity in the North Atlantic, methane release from destabilized ocean sediments, or the burning of coal seams exposed by tectonic activity. But consider this thought experiment. If an industrial civilization had developed 56 million years ago and burned through all available fossil fuel reserves in a few thousand years, what would the geological signature look like? It would look exactly like the PETM, a sudden, massive release of isotopically light carbon, global warming on a scale that transforms entire ecosystems, ocean acidification from excess CO2, mass extinctions as species fail to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. The timescale fits, the chemistry fits, the ecological consequences fit. The only thing that doesn't fit is our assumption that intelligence couldn't have evolved 56 million years ago. But that assumption is based on the fossil record of mammals, a record that preserves perhaps one species in 10,000 and preserves almost nothing of behavior, intelligence, or technology. Plastic pollution creates eternal monuments to our existence. Every piece of plastic ever manufactured still exists somewhere on Earth. Plastic doesn't biodegrade, it only breaks down into smaller and smaller fragments that persist in the environment essentially forever. Microplastics now contaminate every ecosystem on the planet. They're embedded in ice cores from the Arctic, they drift in the deepest ocean trenches, they're incorporated into the bodies of organisms at every level of the food chain. Future geologists will find a distinct plastic layer in sedimentary rocks dating to the 21st century. This layer will be detectable for millions of years, a permanent marker of our industrial civilization. But plastic isn't the only synthetic material we've scattered across the planet. We've created thousands of artificial compounds that never existed in nature. Pesticides, pharmaceuticals, industrial chemicals, synthetic polymers. These molecules have distinct chemical signatures that mark them as products of intelligence and industry. Some of these compounds are virtually indestructible. They'll persist in the geological record long after every trace of our cities has crumbled to dust. If we're already creating chemical signatures that will last for millions of years, why couldn't previous civilizations have done the same? Why couldn't ancient industrial activities have left similar traces in older rock formations? The problem is recognition. We know what our synthetic compounds look like because we created them. But would we recognize synthetic compounds created by intelligence that use different chemistry, different materials, different approaches to industrial production? Nuclear signatures write permanent warnings in stone. The first nuclear weapons test at Alamogordo in 1945 created isotopes that never existed naturally on Earth's surface: plutonium-239, cesium-137, strontium-90, artificial elements with radioactive signatures that will remain detectable for thousands of years. Nuclear weapons testing has scattered these isotopes globally. They appear in ice cores, sediment layers, and the bones of every living organism. The atomic age created a permanent chemical boundary in Earth's geological record. But we've also created much more dramatic nuclear signatures. Nuclear reactors produce isotope ratios that are impossible in nature. Nuclear waste generates radioactive compounds with half-lives spanning thousands of years. Some transuranium elements we've created will remain detectable for millions of years. If a future civilization wanted to prove that 20th century humans had developed nuclear technology, the isotopic evidence would be unambiguous and permanent.
Now, reverse the question. If previous civilizations had developed nuclear technology millions of years ago, would we be able to detect their isotopic signatures in ancient rocks? The answer depends on what we're looking for and where we're looking. Most nuclear isotopes have relatively short half-lives and would have decayed to undetectable levels over millions of years. But some isotopes, particularly those produced in large quantities, might leave traces that persist in specific geological formations. We haven't been looking for ancient nuclear signatures because we didn't think they could exist. But if we started looking systematically, what might we find? Heavy metal concentrations tell stories of ancient industry. Modern industrial activities have dramatically altered the distribution of heavy metals in Earth's surface environments. Lead concentrations in Arctic ice increased dramatically during the Roman period due to silver mining, then spiked again during the Industrial Revolution. Copper, zinc, mercury, and other metals show similar patterns. These metal signatures persist in sedimentary layers long after the civilizations that created them have vanished. Roman lead pollution is still detectable in Greenland ice cores 2,000 years later. But similar metal anomalies appear throughout the geological record in contexts that predate human civilization by millions of years. Layers with unusually high concentrations of rare earth elements, sediments enriched in platinum group metals, rock formations with metal signatures that don't match known natural processes. We typically explain these anomalies through natural mechanisms: volcanic activity, hydrothermal vents, asteroid impacts, or unusual weathering processes. But what if some of them represent the industrial signatures of ancient civilizations? Metallurgy leaves distinctive traces. Smelting operations produce specific ratios of metal isotopes. Industrial mining creates characteristic patterns of elemental concentration. Even basic metalworking generates chemical signatures that differ from natural metal deposits. If intelligent species developed metallurgy millions of years ago, they would have left metal signatures in the sediments and rocks of their time. These signatures might be subtle, distributed across vast areas, or concentrated in specific formations we haven't learned to recognize. The evidence might be hiding in plain sight, misinterpreted as natural processes because we haven't considered the possibility of ancient industrial activity. Atmospheric chemistry preserves the breath of civilizations. Ice cores from Antarctica and Greenland preserve samples of ancient atmospheres going back 800,000 years. The chemical composition of these trapped air bubbles tells detailed stories about past climate conditions, volcanic eruptions, and even forest fires. But they also reveal mysterious atmospheric events that don't match any known natural phenomena. Sudden spikes in methane concentrations that occur too rapidly for biological explanations. Changes in oxygen isotope ratios that suggest massive industrial activity. Atmospheric signatures that look exactly like what we'd expect from large-scale combustion of organic materials. The most recent ice core records show the clear signature of human industrial activity beginning around 1750 CE. Carbon dioxide concentrations, methane levels, and trace gas compositions all shift dramatically at the start of the Industrial Revolution. But similar signatures appear sporadically throughout the deeper ice core record. Brief periods where atmospheric chemistry suggests intensive combustion, rapid deforestation, or large-scale release of greenhouse gases. These events are typically attributed to natural causes, massive wildfires, volcanic outgassing, or sudden release of permafrost or ocean sediments. But the chemical signatures are remarkably similar to our own industrial fingerprint. What if some of these atmospheric anomalies represent the brief industrial phases of civilizations that rose and fell during previous warm periods? What if intelligence has been experimenting with combustion technology repeatedly throughout Earth's history, leaving atmospheric signatures that we interpret as natural events? The Anthropocene layer will outlast our species. Geologists are debating whether to officially designate a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, the age of human impact on Earth's systems. The evidence for human influence on the planet is now overwhelming and permanent. We've altered the chemistry of the atmosphere. We've redistributed elements across the planet's surface. We've created new minerals and synthetic compounds. We've triggered a mass extinction event. We've fundamentally changed the composition of sediments being deposited in oceans, lakes, and river systems. Future geologists will easily identify the Anthropocene layer in rock formations. It will be marked by plastic pollution, nuclear isotopes, heavy metal contamination, altered carbon signatures, and the sudden disappearance of many species from the fossil record. This layer will remain detectable for millions of years, a permanent monument to human industrial civilization. But here's the unsettling implication. If we can create a geological signature that will persist for millions of years, why couldn't previous civilizations have done the same? Why couldn't there be other Anthropocene layers buried deeper in the geological record, marking the rise and fall of earlier experiments in industrial technology? The geological record is vast and complex. We've examined only a tiny fraction of Earth's sedimentary layers. Most of our detailed analysis focuses on recent time periods relevant to human history and climate change. If ancient industrial signatures exist in older rock formations, we might not have found them yet simply because we haven't been looking for them systematically. Biomass burning creates detectable charcoal signatures. Every forest fire, agricultural burn, and industrial combustion process produces microscopic charcoal particles that get incorporated into sedimentary layers. These particles are virtually indestructible and remain identifiable in the geological record for millions of years. The size, shape, and chemical composition of charcoal fragments can reveal information about what was burning, how hot the fires were, and whether the combustion was natural or artificial.
Human activities produce distinctive charcoal signatures. Agricultural burning creates different particles than wildfire. Industrial combustion generates different chemical markers than natural forest fires. Even the burning of different materials, wood, coal, petroleum products, produces identifiable differences in charcoal composition. Analysis of sediment cores reveals the history of fire activity going back thousands of years. The records show natural background levels of wildfire punctuated by dramatic increases in burning during periods of human agricultural expansion. But similar patterns appear in much older sedimentary layers, sudden increases in charcoal deposition that suggest massive increases in burning activity, followed by returns to natural background levels. These ancient fire events are typically explained as natural phenomena. Lightning sparked wildfires during dry periods, volcanic activity igniting vegetation, or climate-driven changes in fire frequency. But what if some of these ancient burning events represent industrial or agricultural activities by previous civilizations? What if the charcoal signatures we interpret as natural wildfires actually mark the rise and fall of earlier experiments in controlled combustion? Concrete leaves an alkaline fingerprint in soil chemistry. Modern concrete production consumes enormous amounts of limestone and produces distinctive chemical signatures in surrounding environments. The high pH of concrete alters soil chemistry for decades after structures collapse and decay. Archaeological sites with extensive concrete construction can be identified centuries later by analyzing soil chemistry. The alkaline signature persists long after visible traces of the buildings have disappeared. But concrete isn't the only alkaline industrial product. Lime production, metal smelting, and various chemical processes all create similar high pH environments. Any civilization that developed these technologies would leave detectable chemical signatures in the soils and sediments of their time. These signatures would be subtle and localized, but they would persist for thousands of years in the right preservation conditions. If ancient industrial activities occurred in locations that have since been covered by younger sediments, altered by erosion, or destroyed by geological processes, the chemical evidence might be gone.
But if preservation conditions were favorable, ancient industrial signatures might still be detectable in soil and sediment chemistry, waiting for archaeologists to develop the analytical techniques and theoretical frameworks needed to recognize them. Rare earth element anomalies point to technological activity. Rare earth elements, lanthanides and actinides with unique chemical properties, are essential for modern high-technology applications. They're used in electronics, magnets, catalysts, and advanced materials. Industrial processing concentrates these elements in ways that never occur naturally. Mining and refining rare earth elements creates distinctive geochemical signatures. The ratios of different rare earth elements in industrial waste are completely different from natural ore deposits. These signatures persist in the environment for thousands of years. But similar rare earth anomalies appear in ancient sedimentary layers that predate human industrial activity by millions of years. Formations with unusual concentrations of specific lanthanides, sediments with rare earth ratios that don't match natural biological processes. These anomalies are typically attributed to unusual geological processes, hydrothermal activity, exotic mineral weathering, or meteorite impacts. But rare earth elements are also essential for any advanced technology based on electromagnetic phenomena. If ancient civilizations developed sophisticated electronics, they would have needed to mine and process rare earth elements. Their industrial activities would have created geochemical signatures similar to our own rare earth processing operations. The evidence might be preserved in specific geological formations that we haven't examined with appropriate analytical techniques, or it might be scattered so widely across ancient landscapes that we haven't recognized the patterns yet. Nitrogen isotope ratios preserve agricultural signatures. Modern agriculture has fundamentally altered Earth's nitrogen cycle. The Haber-Bosch process for producing synthetic fertilizer fixes atmospheric nitrogen on an industrial scale, creating nitrogen compounds with distinctive isotopic signatures. These artificial nitrogen isotopes get incorporated into soils, groundwater, and plant tissues. They become part of the food chain and eventually get preserved in sedimentary deposits and fossil remains. The nitrogen isotope signatures of modern agriculture will remain detectable in the geological record for millions of years, a permanent chemical marker of industrial food production. But nitrogen isotope anomalies also appear in ancient geological formations that predate human agriculture by vast time periods. Sedimentary layers with nitrogen signatures that suggest massive artificial nitrogen fixation. Formations with isotope ratios that don't match natural biological processes. These ancient nitrogen anomalies are explained through natural mechanisms, lightning fixation during storms, biological nitrogen fixation by ancient microbial communities, or unusual chemical processes in early Earth environments. But what if some of these signatures represent agricultural activities by previous civilizations? What if ancient intelligence also discovered methods for fixing atmospheric nitrogen to support large-scale food production? The chemical signatures would be subtle and might require sophisticated analytical techniques to distinguish from natural processes. But if ancient agriculture was extensive enough and persistent enough, it might have left detectable traces in the nitrogen isotope record. Volcanic eruptions provide convenient cover stories. The Deccan Traps in India erupted 66 million years ago, releasing massive amounts of lava and greenhouse gases. The timing coincides with the asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs, making it difficult to determine which event was primarily responsible for the mass extinction. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Major volcanic events provide perfect cover for industrial signatures. The massive release of carbon dioxide, sulfur compounds, and trace elements from volcanic activity can mask similar releases from technological civilizations. If an advanced civilization developed during the same time period as major volcanic activity, their industrial signatures might be completely hidden by the natural geological event. The volcanism would overwhelm and obscure any evidence of artificial carbon releases, atmospheric pollution, or chemical processing. This creates a detection bias. We can easily identify industrial signatures during geologically quiet periods, but technological civilizations that arose during periods of intense volcanism might be completely invisible in the geological record. The most dramatic industrial civilization in Earth's history could have existed 66 million years ago, burning through fossil fuel reserves and releasing massive amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. But if their activities coincided with the Deccan Trap eruptions, we would never be able to distinguish their signature from the natural volcanic event. How many other industrial civilizations might be hiding behind major volcanic episodes? How many technological experiments might be masked by the natural geological catastrophes that punctuate Earth's history? Ice ages reset the chemical record. Glacial periods don't just scrape away surface evidence of civilizations, they also disrupt the chemical and isotopic records that might preserve industrial signatures. Advancing ice sheets grind up bedrock and redistribute sediments across vast areas.
Glacial meltwater flushes chemical signatures out of soils and carries them to the oceans. The massive environmental changes during glacial transitions overwhelm subtler chemical signals from industrial activity. Any technological civilization that developed during warm interglacial periods would face catastrophic disruption when the Ice Age returned. But even if they survived the climate change, their chemical signatures might be erased by glacial processes. This creates another detection bias. Industrial activities during recent interglacial periods might be detectable in the geological record, but older industrial signatures from previous warm periods might have been erased by intervening ice ages. We've only examined the chemical and isotopic records in detail for the most recent glacial cycles. The deeper records from older ice ages are less complete and less well preserved. Industrial signatures from ancient interglacials might exist in these older records, but they might be too degraded or disrupted to recognize with current analytical techniques. The rocks whisper of forgotten industries, but we're only beginning to learn their language. Every sample we analyze reveals new complexities in Earth's chemical history. Isotope ratios that don't match simple models, element distributions that require multiple explanations, atmospheric signatures that push the boundaries of natural processes. We interpret these anomalies through the lens of our current understanding: volcanism, asteroid impacts, unusual biological processes, or exotic geological phenomena. But what if some of them represent something else entirely? What if the chemical record preserves evidence of multiple industrial experiments throughout Earth's history? What if intelligence has been rising and falling repeatedly, leaving subtle signatures that we haven't learned to recognize? The evidence might be scattered throughout the geological record, waiting for us to develop better analytical techniques and broader theoretical perspectives. Or it might be hiding in plain sight, misinterpreted as natural processes because we haven't considered the possibility of ancient technological civilizations. If the rocks whisper, how do we know when it's a human voice or something older? The question haunts every anomalous measurement, every unexplained isotope ratio, every chemical signature that doesn't quite fit our models of natural processes. The Earth remembers everything, but it speaks in a language we're still learning to understand, a chemical vocabulary written in stone, preserved in ice, dissolved in ancient seas that have long since vanished into the abyss. Civilizations collapsed because people stayed silent when they should have acted. Don't repeat their mistake here. If you're still watching, then you care about stories like this, so prove it. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. Otherwise, this story gets buried, forgotten. Just like the civilizations we speak of. Back to our story.
2.5 miles down, in crushing darkness, where no sunlight has ever penetrated, the submersible's lights sweep across a landscape that could be from another planet. Seamounts rise like underwater mountains from the abyssal plain. Strange creatures drift past the porthole, jellies that pulse with their own light, fish with transparent heads and glowing lures, beings so alien they seem designed by a mind that never knew terrestrial life existed. But it's not the life that should terrify you. It's the emptiness. You're flying over 70% of Earth's surface, an area larger than all the continents combined, and humanity has explored less than 5% of it with any detail. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deepest parts of our own planet. Down here, in the crushing blackness, where pressure exceeds 1,000 times that at sea level, time moves differently. Sediments accumulate grain by grain over millions of years. Chemical processes unfold at geological speeds. And somewhere in this vast underwater wilderness, the evidence of ancient civilizations might be waiting, perfectly preserved in conditions so stable they've remained unchanged for millions of years. The ocean doesn't just hide secrets, it keeps them forever. Water erases, but water also preserves. The Mediterranean tells both stories simultaneously. Every year, waves and currents scour away tons of sediment from coastlines, grinding ancient ruins to sand and scattering the fragments across the seafloor. But in the deep basins where currents can't reach, that same sediment settles into layers that preserve microscopic details of past environments. The contradiction defines oceanic archaeology. Shallow waters destroy evidence with relentless mechanical action, waves, tides, currents, and storms that never rest. But deep waters preserve it with almost supernatural precision. In the Black Sea's deepest regions, wooden ships from Byzantine times sit on the seafloor with their rigging intact. The water is so oxygen-poor that decay bacteria can't survive. Organic materials that would rot away in months on land persist for centuries in the anoxic depths. Now imagine what might be preserved in oceanic regions that have remained stable for millions of years. Abyssal plains covered by fine sediments that accumulate undisturbed for geological ages. Deep trenches where materials sink beyond the reach of any current or disturbance. These underwater deserts might hold perfectly preserved records of Earth's entire history, including evidence of civilizations that flourished when the continents had different shapes and the oceans covered different regions. Doggerland drowned an entire world. For 700,000 years, a landmass larger than Britain connected Europe to Scandinavia. Rivers flowed across fertile plains. Forests covered hills that are now 150 feet underwater. Human populations lived, hunted, and built their communities across a landscape that no longer existed. Then the Ice Age ended. Sea levels rose 400 feet in less than 10,000 years. Incredibly rapid in human terms, but merely an instant in geological time. An entire subcontinent vanished beneath the waves of the North Sea. Doggerland's drowning demonstrates how quickly vast inhabited areas can be completely submerged and hidden from view. But here's what should make you question everything you think you know about Earth's history. Doggerland disappeared just 8,000 years ago. It's practically yesterday in geological terms. Ice ages have been ending and sea levels rising for millions of years. Each cycle drowns coastal civilizations and buries their remains beneath hundreds of feet of marine sediments. How many Doggerlands have been lost to rising seas? How many inhabited continents lie beneath waters that have been inaccessible to exploration for thousands or millions of years? Fishing trawls still pull up Neolithic tools from the drowned North Sea landscape, stone axes, arrowheads, and worked bone implements from cultures that thrived when Britain was connected to Europe. These artifacts represent the scattered remnants of entire civilizations that were completely lost to historical record until modern technology allowed us to explore the seafloor. What more sophisticated artifacts might lie deeper in the sediments from periods when sea levels were lower and much larger areas of the continental shelf were exposed to habitation?
The Yonaguni Monument defies comfortable explanations. Off the coast of Japan, a massive stone structure rises from the seafloor like a stepped pyramid designed by alien architects. The Yonaguni Monument features precisely cut terraces, apparent stairways, and geometric formations that challenge natural explanations. Marine geologist Masayaki Kimura argues that the structure shows clear evidence of human modification. Tool marks on stone surfaces, geometric angles that don't occur in natural rock formations, and architectural features that seem designed for human use.
Other scientists insist the monument is entirely natural, a product of geological processes that created the illusion of artificial construction. They point to the layered sandstone composition, the natural fracture patterns in the region, and the absence of clear artifacts as evidence against human involvement. But here's the unsettling detail that both sides acknowledge. If the Yonaguni monument is artificial, it was last above sea level at least 12,000 years ago. It predates known megalithic construction by thousands of years. It suggests architectural capabilities that supposedly didn't exist when it was built. The debate continues because the implications are staggering. If humans were building massive stone structures 12,000 years ago, everything we think we know about the development of civilization is wrong. But Yonaguni represents a broader problem. How can we possibly evaluate underwater archaeological sites when we can explore so little of the ocean floor? The monument was discovered accidentally by sport divers in 1987. How many other underwater ruins might exist in areas we've never explored? Mediterranean secrets hide beneath 2 miles of water. 5.96 million years ago, the Mediterranean was a desert basin deeper than the Grand Canyon. Tectonic forces had closed the connection to the Atlantic, and the entire sea evaporated, leaving behind a vast landscape of salt flats, deep valleys, and scattered lakes. For perhaps 700,000 years, this Mediterranean basin was dry land. Rivers carved deep channels through the exposed seafloor. Life colonized the new landscape, and if intelligence had emerged on Earth by that time, civilizations might have flourished across areas that are now beneath miles of water. When the Atlantic finally broke through the Gibraltar barrier, water thundered into the empty basin with impossible force. The entire Mediterranean refilled in perhaps a few decades, drowning any trace of life that had developed during the dry period. Today, that ancient landscape lies beneath 2 miles of seawater and millions of years of accumulated sediment. We cannot reach it. We cannot explore it. We cannot investigate whether intelligence left any traces during the vast span of time when the Mediterranean basin was habitable land. But the Mediterranean desiccation wasn't unique. Ocean basins have opened and closed throughout Earth's history. Seas have dried up and refilled repeatedly. Each cycle creates opportunities for life and potentially intelligence to colonize vast areas that are later drowned and made inaccessible to archaeological investigation. How many lost continents lie beneath our deepest seas? How many drowned worlds wait in oceanic regions we cannot explore with current technology? Hydrothermal vents sustain alien ecosystems. In the deepest parts of the ocean, where tectonic plates spread apart and volcanic heat warms the seafloor, life thrives in conditions that seem impossible. Hydrothermal vent communities exist in perpetual darkness, under crushing pressure, fed by chemical energy rather than sunlight. Giant tube worms grow without digestive systems, sustained by symbiotic bacteria that convert hydrogen sulfide into usable energy. Eyeless shrimp swarm around water that would be instantly lethal to surface-dwelling life. Entire ecosystems operate on completely different principles than anything we see on land.
These vent communities have existed for hundreds of millions of years, powered by Earth's internal heat rather than solar energy. They represent a completely independent experiment in life, one that could survive global catastrophes that would destroy surface ecosystems. But here's the disturbing implication. If life can evolve intelligence independently in completely different environments, why couldn't intelligence have emerged in deep ocean ecosystems millions of years before it appeared on land? Hydrothermal vent intelligence would operate under completely different constraints than land-based consciousness. It might develop technologies based on chemistry rather than mechanics, communication systems based on chemical signals rather than sound or light,
and architectural approaches adapted to high pressure and perpetual darkness. Such civilizations might leave no trace we would recognize. Their technologies might be entirely chemical or biological. Their structures might be indistinguishable from natural rock formations. Their entire existence might unfold in environments we cannot reach or explore systematically. Anoxic zones preserve impossible details. In certain regions of the ocean, where water circulation is restricted, oxygen levels drop to nearly zero. These anoxic zones become underwater museums where organic materials resist decay for millions of years. The Black Sea's deep waters contain perfectly preserved ancient shipwrecks with their rigging intact. Lake Tanganyika's bottom waters preserve microscopic details of diatoms and pollen from hundreds of thousands of years ago. The Cariaco Basin off Venezuela maintains annual sediment layers going back millions of years, each one preserving detailed chemical records of past environments. These natural preservation zones demonstrate that the right oceanic conditions can maintain organic materials essentially forever. Wood doesn't rot, textiles don't decay, even soft tissues can remain intact for geological time periods. If ancient civilizations existed in coastal regions that later became anoxic ocean basins, their artifacts and structures might be perfectly preserved in underwater environments we haven't learned to reach or explore systematically. The preservation potential is staggering. An entire city could be maintained in pristine condition for millions of years if it ended up in the right oceanic environment. Buildings, streets, artifacts, even organic remains could persist unchanged while surface continents are scraped clean by ice ages and eroded by wind and rain. But anoxic zones are often inaccessible to exploration. They occur in deep basins, restricted circulation patterns, or areas where hydrogen sulfide concentrations would be lethal to human investigators. We know these preservation environments exist, but we cannot systematically explore them for archaeological evidence. Submarine canyons carve highways to the abyss. Monterey Canyon off the California coast drops from the shoreline to depths of 2 miles in less than 100 miles. This underwater Grand Canyon was carved by turbidity currents, underwater avalanches of sediment that flow down the continental slope at speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour. These submarine canyons exist along coastlines worldwide. They funnel sediments from shallow coastal regions into the deep ocean basins, creating underwater highways that transport materials from land to the abyss. But turbidity currents don't just carry mud and sand, they transport everything. Organic materials, artifacts, even large structures that get caught in the flow. A turbidity current could carry the entire remains of a coastal city into the deep ocean, depositing the fragments in abyssal plains thousands of miles from their origin.
This transport mechanism means that evidence of coastal civilizations might not remain near the original sites. Artifacts could be scattered across vast deep ocean regions, mixed with sediments from multiple time periods, and deposited in locations that seem to have no relationship to their origins. Searching for evidence of ancient coastal civilizations becomes nearly impossible when turbidity currents have been redistributing the evidence for millions of years. The artifacts might exist, but they could be anywhere in the deep ocean basins that receive sediment from continental margins. Seamount civilizations could exist beyond our detection. Underwater mountains, seamounts, rise from abyssal plains like islands that never quite reach the surface. These isolated ecosystems develop unique communities of life, often with species found nowhere else on Earth. Some seamounts extend to within a few hundred feet of the surface, creating near-surface environments that are completely isolated from continental influences. They offer stable platforms in the open ocean, protected from the sediment flows and turbidity currents that disturb deeper seafloor regions. If intelligence evolved in marine environments, seamounts would provide ideal locations for technological development. They offer solid foundations for construction, access to both deep and shallow marine resources, and isolation from the geological processes that disrupt continental regions. Seamount civilizations could have existed for millions of years without leaving any trace on continental landmasses. Their technologies might be entirely adapted to underwater environments. Their materials might be indistinguishable from natural coral or rock formations.
Their entire history might have unfolded in oceanic regions we cannot reach or investigate systematically. Thousands of seamounts exist in Earth's oceans. Most have never been explored by humans. We don't know what structures, formations, or communities might exist on their surfaces. The possibility of ancient artificial constructions on isolated seamounts cannot be ruled out with current exploration capabilities. Deep-sea trenches are Earth's ultimate archives. The Mariana Trench descends more than 7 miles below sea level, deeper than Mount Everest is tall. At these crushing depths, pressure exceeds 1,100 times that at sea level. Water temperature hovers just above freezing. No sunlight has ever penetrated the absolute darkness. But life still exists in the deepest trenches. Microbes thrive in sediments under pressure that would instantly crush surface organisms. Chemical processes unfold at rates determined by geological rather than biological time. These extreme environments might preserve evidence better than anywhere else on Earth. The last human dies on a Tuesday. It doesn't matter how. Pandemic, climate collapse, nuclear winter, or simple demographic failure. What matters is what happens next. The great experiment ends. 7 billion minds go silent. The cities stand empty.
And Earth begins to forget. If you want to understand how previous civilizations could vanish without trace, watch ours disappear. The process starts immediately. Within hours of the last heartbeat, the first power grids fail. Without human hands to feed coal into furnaces, to monitor reactors, to flip the switches that keep our electric rivers flowing, the lights go out across continents. Darkness reclaims the world. But subscribe, lean in close, and witness something that will chill your bones. Because what you're about to see isn't science fiction. It's a preview, a mirror, showing us exactly how thoroughly time erases everything we think matters. This is the dark truth written in stone and sediment, the secret that every ancient ruin whispers. You are not permanent. Day 1. Traffic lights blink out. Elevators stop between floors. The hum of civilization, that constant electrical buzz we never notice, falls silent. Dogs howl in the suburbs. Zoo animals pace their cages. Without the sound of human voices, you can hear wind through the empty streets. Week 1. The nuclear reactors begin their automated shutdown sequences, designed by engineers who knew this day might come. Most succeed. A few don't. Small fires bloom in server farms and electrical substations. Unattended industrial processes run wild, releasing chemicals into rivers that no one monitors anymore. The silence deepens. Month 1. House pets emerge from homes through dog doors and broken windows. Cats adapt quickly. They were never fully domesticated anyway. Dogs form packs. Livestock break through fences desperate for water. In the cities, rats multiply without pest control. Insects reclaim the buildings we spent so much effort keeping them out of. Year 1. The first buildings begin to fail. Not collapse, that takes longer, but windows crack from temperature changes. Roofs leak without maintenance. Water finds its way into foundations, and water always wins. Vines creep up skyscrapers. Weeds split sidewalks. The patient work of reclamation begins. Nature is more persistent than our concrete. Year 10. Most wooden structures have rotted or burned. Suburban neighborhoods become forest again, with only concrete foundations marking where families once lived. Steel and glass towers still pierce the sky, but their facades crumble. Birds nest in office windows. Deer graze in Times Square. The wild things return to the places we borrowed from them. Year 50. The great cities look like bombed-out shells, not from any explosion, but from the steady pressure of freeze-thaw cycles, acid rain, and simple neglect. Highways crack and buckle as tree roots undermine the asphalt. Bridges sag and snap. The infrastructure web that connected our world unravels thread by thread. Rivers reclaim their floodplains. Coastlines shift.
The scars we carved into the landscape begin to heal. Century 1. Most surface traces of human civilization have vanished. A few stone buildings remain, pyramids, nuclear waste storage sites. The face is carved into Mount Rushmore, but the wood is rotted, the metal has rusted, the plastic has photodegraded into microparticles that scatter on the wind. From orbit, Earth looks wild again. But some traces persist where we can't see them. In the ice cores of Greenland and Antarctica, thin layers record our industrial age. The carbon dioxide spike from burning fossil fuels, the radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing, the lead from leaded gasoline. These chemical signatures preserve our existence in frozen archives that could last for hundreds of thousands of years. In the deep ocean sediments, another record accumulates. Microscopic plastic particles settle into abyssal muds. Concrete fragments from collapsed coastal cities sink to the seafloor. Heavy metals concentrated by our industries precipitate out of seawater. Layer by layer, the ocean builds a monument to our existence. In the geological record, we create a boundary. Geologists of the future, if any arise, might identify the Anthropocene as clearly as we recognize the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary that marks the dinosaurs' extinction. A thin, dark line in the rock, marking the moment when one dominant species gave way to another. Chemical anomalies that speak of mass extinction, atmospheric disruption, biological collapse.
Our signature, written in stone. Millennium 1. Even the Great Pyramids have crumbled. Wind and sand and the patient work of geology erase the last monuments to human ambition. The plastic polymers we scattered across the planet finally break down completely. The nuclear waste decays to safer isotopes. Our cities become oil deposits for some far future civilization to burn. The wheel turns. But deep in the rock record, traces remain. Isotope ratios that don't match natural patterns, concentrated metals in sediment layers, microscopic fossils of our genetically modified organisms, mass extinction patterns that future paleontologists might puzzle over, evidence of rapid climate change preserved in tree rings and coral growth bands. We cannot erase ourselves completely. Million-year mark. The continents have shifted. Mountain ranges rise and fall. New oceans open, old ones close. The very geography that defined our world has changed beyond recognition. But still, in the deepest rocks, chemical anomalies mark our passing. Carbon isotope excursions from burning fossil fuels, elevated background radiation from nuclear testing, extinction patterns that speak of ecological collapse. Our ghosts linger in the stones. And now, in this mirror of our own disappearance, see the terrible possibility that haunts this entire investigation. What if we are not the first? What if, in the deep archives of stone and sediment, other chemical signatures wait to be discovered? Other isotope anomalies, other extinction boundaries, other brief, bright spikes in the atmospheric record that mark the rise and fall of intelligence. What if the question isn't whether previous civilizations existed, but whether we're wise enough to read their epitaphs correctly? The myths whisper to us across the ages. Hindu scriptures speak of cycles within cycles, kalpas and yugas, ages of gold and silver and bronze and iron, each ending in destruction before the wheel turns again. The Greeks told of 5 ages of man, each surpassed by the next until the gods grew tired and started over. Native American prophecies describe previous worlds, each destroyed when humanity lost its way. Perhaps these aren't myths at all, but memories. Cultural DNA encoding the deepest truth about intelligence on Earth, that it rises, flourishes, and falls, again
and again, and again. Each civilization convinced of its permanence, each leaving traces so faint that the next can barely detect them. Each asking the same question we ask now. Are we alone in time? The carbon cycle continues its ancient rhythm. Plants pull CO2 from the air. Animals exhale it back. Weathering rocks absorb it. Volcanic eruptions release it. The great wheel of chemistry that has operated for billions of years will operate for billions more. Our contribution to this cycle, massive as it seems to us, becomes just another fluctuation in the deep record. Background noise in the symphony of deep time. But noise with a pattern, a signature. A fingerprint pressed into the planetary record that speaks of brief, brilliant intelligence burning bright before guttering out. The Silurian hypothesis asks whether industrial civilizations leave detectable traces in the geological record. The answer is yes, they do. We can detect our own impact clearly. The question is whether we can detect anyone else's, whether we're humble enough to admit that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, whether we're brave enough to keep looking. Standing on the edge of our own potential extinction, we see how easily everything we've built could disappear, how quickly forests can reclaim our cities, how thoroughly time can erase the works of intelligence, how even the memory of our existence might fade to faint chemical anomalies in rocks that future geologists might dismiss as natural phenomena. The Earth has swallowed civilizations before. We've seen it happen to the Maya, to the Angkor kingdom, to countless societies that rose and fell within recorded history. How many more rose and fell before history began? How many more in the vast expanses of time before our species even existed?
The question haunts us because it is unanswerable. We cannot prove we were first. The geological record is too fragmentary. The surface of our planet too dynamic. The deep ocean too vast and unexplored. The chemistry of deep time too complex and ambiguous. But we also cannot prove we were not first. And in that uncertainty lies both terror and wonder. Terror at our cosmic solitude, if we are indeed alone in time. Wonder at the possibility that intelligence has flowered on this planet many times before, each iteration adding its own brief chapter to the story of consciousness in the universe. Perhaps somewhere in the deep archives of stone, chemical signatures wait that tell of other minds, other dreams, other civilizations that looked up at the same stars we see and asked the same questions we ask. Perhaps not. The rocks keep their secrets. The deep ocean hoards its mysteries. Time flows on, carrying all our works toward the same inevitable dissolution that claimed everything that came before. But here's the final, haunting truth. If another species rises millions of years after we're gone, if intelligence blooms again from the soil enriched by our decay, they will look at the thin, dark line we left in the geological record and ask the same question that brought you to this story. What if we are not the first? And like us, they may never know for certain. They may find only hints, shadows, chemical whispers of ancient greatness ground to dust by time. They may stand where we stood, looking back through deep time, wondering if they are alone or if the universe has played this same beautiful, tragic game of consciousness many times before. The wheel turns. The question echoes across the ages. What if we are not the first?
What if we will not be the last? What if intelligence is not an accident, but an inevitability, a flame that kindles wherever conditions allow, burns bright for its brief moment, and then gives way to the next spark in the endless night? The stones remember nothing. The stones remember everything. And in the space between those truths, the mystery lives on. History is full of voices that were silenced because no one chose to remember. Don't let this story be another echo that fades away. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications, because if you don't, this too may vanish, just like the civilizations we talk about.